Ladies and gentlemen, can I get you to quieten down? We have one final general session, and it would be very nice if we could get people to quieten down and focus on the screens. Ladies and gentlemen, can I get you to stop your individual table conversations? I'm sorry to be trying to be a schoolmaster here, but we have a very rare opportunity to have a conversation about COVID that the organizers of YES have planned, and we would be grateful if you would do us the courtesy of listening in. I'm going to ask one more time, can people stop their conversations at their tables? Can the people who are standing up near these tables go back to their seats? And if they really feel they cannot do that, please, out of courtesy, leave the hall and have your conversation in private. I would very much appreciate if people would stop the table conversations, because we are trying to start the session. This is not a contest. I'm sure your opinions are very important, but right now we have a session. If you do not want to attend the session, please feel free. This is a free country. You may leave, but don't interrupt the people who are trying to have the session. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to introduce Noubar Afeyan. I'm going to begin by asking him to tell us all a little bit about himself, because I know that Ukrainians and people in this part of the world often think you have had a very rough history, and you have had a very rough history. As Victor described, the place of Ukraine in the 20th century. But I want to introduce you to a man who has had a tough history in the sense of being born in the wrong place at the wrong time and has managed to overcome it. So Noubar Afeyan currently is the chairman of Moderna. He has 100 patents to his name, more than 100 scientific scholarly articles, has founded 50 startups with a combined value of in the tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars. According to Forbes magazine, he is worth $5.5 billion. And he started his life as an Armenian in Lebanon, very quickly to be in the middle of the Lebanese civil war. So Noubar, welcome, and tell us, what were you doing as an Armenian in Lebanon in the 1960s?
Well, Fareed, it's great to be with you. I hope you can all hear me fine. And sorry not to be there in person. Indeed, I'm born of Armenian parents who ended up in Lebanon following the genocide in World War I that spread my family and many others across the world, in my father's case to Bulgaria, and then eventually to Lebanon, and my mother, Syria to Lebanon. I grew up, like many immigrants into the country, initially in an idyllic life in Lebanon, and then when the civil war hit in the mid-70s, all chaos broke out. We lived there during that time for a period, and then ultimately escaped to Canada, which took us in as political refugees and quite suddenly, and my life was transformed from then on.
So from the Ottoman Empire to Beirut to Canada, but take us one step further. You're now in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
After spending a number of years in Montreal and getting an undergraduate education, came to MIT, which is in Cambridge, to study what was then a brand new field of biochemical engineering. This was the first time that technology was being developed to use life and to use life science, and they needed engineers that could do practical things with it. This was the early 80s. And since that time, after getting a PhD, that's basically what I've been involved in, innovating new ways to use life science to better mankind.
Now, would it be fair to say that you know, we hear a lot of pessimism around COVID, but you believe that the technology that we have used, that you have used to create the vaccine, is one of the most positive developments in human medicine ever, correct?
Hard for me to judge, Fareed. Suffice it to say that it had to become a very negative situation for such a sudden positive to even be possible, because we really are dealing with an unprecedented degree of assault and threat. This is almost like a form of war. We happen to be fighting against a non-human combatant, but it's every bit as resourceful, maybe even more agile than many of the human wars that take place. And we happen to have a form of weapon in the form of messenger RNA that could ultimately defend and protect humans from this attack. And the technology, having been developed by us for over a decade, happened to be poised to be put to use against this sudden threat. Now, of course, the same technology has been used and is being used for many other diseases, but none of them pose such an immediate and vast threat. And so it's become amplified in its significance as a result.
So let's try to understand the technology very, very simply. And you know, I will simplify and you tell me if I'm getting it all wrong. But it used to be with the vaccine, you had to take a part of the virus or a weakened form of the virus and inject it into a human being's body. And then the body will react by producing antibodies. And this was a kind of almost like a skill, an art, you trial and error, you're trying to get it right. What the mRNA vaccine that Moderna and to a certain extent Pfizer use, it's like you send a text message to the body saying, here's the code, produce the antibodies, and the virtue of this is that you have taken what was a craft and turned it into a mass-produced item.
Well, I think it's a very good description, Fareed. I'll just remind folks that the ultimate hero in this is the immune system that we're born with, and that really silently protects us against many, many threats. People don't realize that throughout our lives, we're getting microcancers that our immune system beats back, and only when it fails to do so do we see a cancer. Similarly, infections by the hundreds are attacking us. Our immune system is the biggest pharmaceutical gift we've been given. The only problem is that the immune system sometimes gets compromised in the process of figuring out what to go against. And a fierce virus such as the coronavirus does a lot of damage before our immune system learns what to do. And vaccines, of course, were invented long ago to try to anticipate the threat and then create protection. And as you said, it's historically been attenuated viruses or synthetic pieces of viruses. But ultimately, one of the interesting things is that a virus is a life form, in this particular case, that's based, in fact, on RNA. What the virus does is enters our body, uses the same form of a text message to simply make more of itself. And since we know that, we can actually provide to the body, if I can use your analogy and extend it, a keyword that's contained in the text. And as long as the body now sees that, it's ready to search and destroy any message that makes that keyword, which is unique to the virus, in this case, the spike protein. And it does so by delivering the information in the exact form the virus delivers the information, which is RNA. And so our body knows how to take in that information, how to convert it into a protein, get the immune system to see it when it's in a non-threatening form, just that particular protein. And then when the virus shows up, the antibody levels in your body is ready to detect it. And even if the antibody levels start waning, as we're hearing about these days, we have many other T cells, B cells that are the follow-on forms of protection. So really, to me, the hero in the first instance is the immune system in every one of us. In fact, we can talk about people who refuse to take the vaccine. Ironically, they're denying their immune system a chance to help them because the immune system is ready to go if it's given the code. So yes, it's a collaboration between information technology, life science or biotechnology that we invented, and ultimately the body's own immune technology.
So what are the most promising areas where you could imagine a similar kind of RNA technology producing vaccines? Could we imagine vaccines for HIV/AIDS? Could we imagine vaccines for cancer?
Well, we are working on both of those and another 12 different vaccines that are being tested in many cases in humans right now. Cytomegalovirus, which is a huge threat to us. There's no vaccine against that. Very dangerous for pregnant women and later in life for everybody. EBV, Epstein-Barr virus, RSV. There are literally a dozen different vaccines that are under development and many more to come, cancer included. In the cancer case, we are not going to prevent, but we're going to basically beat back cancer with similar coded information. Interestingly for your audience, in the case of cancer, we're in human trials where we give a patient the information about its own cancer in the form of 35 different mRNAs. And the body makes an immune defense against all of them. And our hope is that if you have such an immune response, some parts of the immune response will be able to kill the cancer cells. And that's yet to be seen. It's in clinical trials. So yes, this kind of information molecule can be used for many, many different types of vaccines.
And I want to get a sense of the speed between the time that you guys started working on the coronavirus, when you got the genomic sequence, and the time that you first developed the vaccine. Not, then it was tested and all. But how much time did it take you between the time you got the genomic sequence and the time you were able to develop the vaccine?
Well, it's almost a laughably short time, which is a couple of days, 2 days. I don't know what we were doing for all of one of those 2 days, but essentially it's a computer activity. Literally, the RNA is in the form, is the code that the virus uses. We knew which protein to look for because this was a part of a family of well-studied viruses, and so we just took the information, made the spike protein in the form of our mRNA, messenger RNA. We knew from tons of experience exactly how to code it, what to put on it, etc. So the computational part was a couple of days. The synthesis was a few days. And then it was all into testing in animals. It took us a couple of weeks to just confirm that this worked like all the other vaccines we had already been developing. And as has been reported, within 44 days of that original start, we entered the first human being and started generating antibodies in them.
When you hear about all these different possible variants, are you pretty confident that you will be able to adjust the vaccine, your vaccine, to meet the challenge of new variants?
Well, there's two ways to battle back variants. One is to have a robust antibody level in people so that even if they're not directed to the particular variant, you already have quite a bit of defense. Keep in mind, the body doesn't make one antibody, it makes hundreds. And there are many parts of the protein it attacks. So a variant largely can escape 1, 2, 5, 10 different places, but it will not escape every antibody that we make, even against the original vaccine. But yes, we also are making, we reported yesterday, several additional variant vaccines that we're beginning to test, just in case we need even a more directed one. And of course, we now have computational tools, which we're using actively, to anticipate all the variants that could arise ahead of time and see which ones would be most problematic. And even before they arise, begin to make the mRNA so that when they do, we can test them very quickly. So it's really, as I described earlier, an interesting battle between evolutionary ingenuity and technological or human ingenuity. And while in the beginning we were caught somewhat unprepared broadly as a planet, I think that this technology plus the learnings we're doing gives me a lot of courage to say we will be able to combat it and even anticipate it.
So describe, given what you know about these technologies, what is your sense of what happens with this pandemic over the next year and a half?
Boy, now, Fareed, you're asking me to delve into an area you're more expert in than I am, which is how governments act, how societies act, how nationalism, plays with internationalism, many things that are well above my pay grade, I must say. And I do want the audience to understand that it's the sum total of all of those decisions, not what the virus does and what the immune system does, that will ultimately dictate how this plays out. And we're seeing it playing out live when you have a lot of people who choose not to get protected. They basically endanger everybody else. It's no different than any physical exposure that a society may have or a community to foreign attack. If everybody says, well, no, I'd rather not be protected, come on in, then you're going to endanger your neighbors and everybody else around you. So I would say we're in uncharted territory. There are lots of experts, more opinions than experts about what's going to happen. I can't really venture a guess. All I could say is there's a chance that the Delta virus is, maybe the or among the highest threatening ones, and our immune system is beginning to figure out how to fight it back with vaccines and also natural immunity that unfortunately people who are being infected are developing. If there's nothing worse to come, maybe this subsides into an endemic seasonal threat. We don't know, but that's probably what might happen. I'll point out that one of the theories that is very interesting that's out there is that there was, in fact, a pandemic in the 1890s, I believe, mainly in Russia, that was a coronavirus pandemic that it's believed to be among the sources of some 25% of the common cold that comes from coronaviruses. You remember we see a lot of reporting about how the common cold is often a coronavirus. Well, the ancestors of that coronavirus may well have been that pandemic. So similarly, our grandchildren may well now be facing coronaviruses that are descendants of this subsegment of what SARS-CoV-2 that's been attacking us. So there will be a gradual retreat. The faster we get people vaccinated, the more rapid that'll be. And then hopefully we will learn or not forget that if we just let all our guards down 5-10 years from now, the same thing will happen again.
And finally, Noubar, give us a sense, let's say 10 years from now, will medicine be very different because of this revolution that Moderna and others are part of, the merging of biotech with information technology and quantum computing and such, and how will it be different?
Well, you're touching on a topic that I don't know what's going to happen, but I know what we're going to try to make happen, which is this whole paradigm of coming up with platforms. mRNA is just one such platform that can produce many, many different new medicines. Is a really exciting prospect because biotechnology till now has been largely an artisanal activity. In fact, pharmaceuticals in general, it's been very bespoke. It's been like a piece of art where it's very specific to the genre, to the person, whereas our bodies are pretty common between us. We just don't understand how they do what they do and what disease is. As we begin to learn and as computers help us manage and extract patterns out of these information, we're getting bolder and bolder about coming up with common solutions, namely platforms from which dozens of drugs will emerge. So one change is definitely that convergence you spoke of will matter. The second, and I really hope this takes hold, is that we have to realize that our whole healthcare system, which is essentially a sick care system, because you have to be sick to receive any healthcare these days, has to change so that we move upstream from disease. That doesn't just mean being fit and being, well-trained, etc., and that, but it means we need to be able to detect early forms of disease or even what we call pre-disease, intervene with them very early and monitor them so that we reduce the disease burden. Now that disease burden could be an infection, as we're just witnessing now, we were totally unprepared for, or cancer, obesity, heart disease. These are all diseases that are too late to treat once they take hold. And so I really hope that all this technology, all this science moves upstream and we begin to do what we call preemptive medicine. So a decade from now, rather than 2% of our healthcare budget in the West being spent on preemption, if we spend 10%, 20%, I would venture to say we'll save lives, take the disease burden down, and save a lot of money trying to treat too late diseases.
Noubar Afeyan, thank you so much. This was an honor and a treat for all of us. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
All right. Finally, post dinner, there are 4 different breakout groups: pipelines, politics, and pipe dreams,
Thank you. Bye-bye.
decarbonization, crisis in Belarus, and social inequality. So, depending on what you want to do, you've got 4 different choices there. Thank you all very much.